Section 3 of Pirates of Panama, The Buccaneers of America, by A.O. Exquemelin, translated by G.A. Williams. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Chapter 2. A description of Tortuga, the fruits and plants there, how the French first settled there at two several times, and forced out the Spaniards. The author twice sold in the said island. The island of Tortuga is situated on the north side of Hispaniola in 20 degrees 30 minutes latitude. Its just extent is 60 leagues about. The Spaniards, who gave name to this island, called it so from the shape of the land, in some manner resembling a great sea tortoise, called by them Tortuga de Mar. The country is very mountainous, and full of rocks, and yet thick of lofty trees, that grow upon the hardest of those rocks, without partaking of a softer soil. Hence it comes that their roots for the greatest part are seen naked and tangled among the rocks, like the branching of ivy against our walls. That part of this island which stretches to the north is totally uninhabited. The reason is, first, because it is incommodious and unhealthy; and secondly, for the ruggedness of the coast, that gives no access to the shore, unless among rocks almost inaccessible. For this cause it is peopled only on the south part, which hath only one port, indifferently good; yet this harbour has two entries, or channels, which afford passage to ships of 70 guns. The port itself being without danger, and capable of receiving a great number of vessels. The inhabited parts, of which the first is called the Lowlands, or Low Country, this is the chief among the rest, because it contains the port aforesaid. The town is called Cayona, and here live the chiefest and richest planters of the island. The second part is called the Middle Plantation. Its soil is yet almost new, being only known to be good for tobacco. The third is named Ringot, and is situated towards the west part of the island. The fourth and last is called the Mountain, in which place were made the first plantations upon this island. As to the wood that grows here, we have already said that the trees are exceedingly tall and pleasing to the sight, whence no man will doubt but they may be applied to several uses. Such is the yellow saunder, which by the inhabitants is called bois de chandelle, or in English candle wood, because it burns like a candle, and serves them with light while they fish by night. Here grows also lignum sanctum, or guaiacum. Its virtues are very well known, more especially to those who observe not the seventh commandment, and are given to impure copulations; physicians drawing hence in several compositions the greatest antidote for venereal diseases, as also for cold and vicious humours. The trees likewise, which afford gummi elemi, grow here in great abundance, as doth Radix Chinae, or China root; yet this is not so good as that of other parts of the western world. It is very white and soft, and serves for pleasant food for the wild boars, when they can find nothing else. This island also is not deficient in aloes, nor an infinite number of the other medicinal herbs, which may please the curiosity of such as are given to their contemplation. Moreover, for building of ships, or any other sort of architecture, here are found several sorts of timber. The fruits likewise, which grow here abundantly, are nothing inferior in quantity or quality to what other islands produce. I shall name only some of the most ordinary and common. Such are magnoit, potatoes, abajou apples, llanas, basons, pacais, carosols, mamines, anananes, and divers other sorts, which I omit to specify. Here grow likewise in great numbers those trees called palmitos, or palmites, whence is drawn a certain juice, which serves the inhabitants instead of wine, and whose leaves cover their houses instead of tiles. In this island aboundeth also the wild boar. The governor hath prohibited the hunting of them with dogs, fearing lest the island being but small, the whole race of them in a short time should be destroyed. The reason why he thought convenient to preserve these wild beasts was, that in case of any invasion, the inhabitants might sustain themselves with their food, especially were they once constrained to retire to the woods and mountains. Yet this sort of game is almost impeded by itself, by reason of the many rocks and precipices, which for the greatest part are covered with little shrubs, very green and thick, whence the huntsmen have oftentimes fallen, and left us the sad remembrance of many a memorable disaster. At certain time of the year there resort to Tortuga large flocks of wild pigeons, and then the inhabitants feed on them very plentifully, having more than they can consume, and leaving totally to their repose all other sorts of fowl, both wild and tame, that so, in the absence of the pigeons, these may supply their place. But as nothing in the universe, though never so pleasant, can be found, but what hath something of bitterness with it, the very symbol of this truth we see in the aforesaid pigeons. For these, the season being past, can scarce be touched with the tongue, they become so extremely lean and bitter even to admiration. The reason of this bitterness is attributed to a certain seed which they eat about that time, even as bitter as gall. About the sea shores, everywhere are found great multitudes of crabs, both of land and sea, and both sorts very big. These are good to feed servants and slaves, whose palates they please, but are very hurtful to the sight. Besides being eaten too often, they cause great giddiness in the head, with much weakness of the brain, so that very frequently they are deprived of sight for a quarter of an hour. The French having settled in the Isle of St. Christopher, planted there sort of trees, of which at present there possibly may be greater quantities, with the timber whereof they make long boats and hoys, which they sent thence westward, well manned and victualled, to discover other islands. These setting sail from St. Christopher, came within sight of Hispaniola, where they arrived with abundance of joy. Having landed, they marched into the country, where they found large quantities of cattle, such as cows, bulls, horses, and wild boars; but finding no great profit in these animals, unless they could enclose them, and knowing likewise the island to be pretty well peopled by the Spaniards, they thought it convenient to enter upon and seize the island of Tortuga. This they performed without any difficulty, there being upon the island no more than 10 or 12 Spaniards to guard it. These few men let the French come in peaceably, and possess the island for 6 months without any trouble. Meanwhile they passed and repassed with their canoes to Hispaniola, from whence they transported many people, and at last began to plant the whole island of Tortuga. The few Spaniards remaining there, perceiving the French to increase their number daily, began at last to repine at their prosperity, and grudge them the possession. Hence they gave notice to others of their nation, their neighbours, who sent several boats, well armed and manned, to dispossess the French. This expedition succeeded according to their desires; for the new possessors, seeing the great number of Spaniards, fled with all they had to the woods. and hence by night they wafted over with canoes to